Alrighty, so we're going to take a look at our next part of figurative language. So our first piece is going to be alliteration. So alliteration is the repetition of the first consonant sounds in several words in a sentence. Right, so notice that it says consonant sounds and not just first letters. So words in a sentence can have the same letter and not be considered alliteration because the sounds aren't the same. So we need to make sure that we're paying attention to the sounds. So an example would be, we wander through the wild woods in search of wonder. Or, Sarah saw a silly seal on Saturday. All right, so those are two examples of alliteration. Our next piece is hyperbole. So hyperbole is an outrageous exaggeration that emphasizes a point. It can be ridiculous or funny. For example, our teacher gave us 2 years of homework tonight. Just means that you got a lot of homework. Doesn't mean that your homework's going to take you 2 years. Another example, your car is so old there are hieroglyphics inside. It doesn't necessarily mean that there are actual hieroglyphics inside of your car, it just means that your car is really old. So let's take a look at our guided practice pages. So our first page is going to be talking about hyperbole. So as a reminder, hyperbole is an exaggerated statement that isn't meant to be taken literally. For example, Keith has a ton of homework tonight. Of course, if Keith puts his homework on a scale and weighed it, it wouldn't really weigh a ton, which is 2,000 pounds. The sentence is an exaggeration that shows that he has a lot of homework. So for numbers 1 through 8, we're going to read the sentence and decide if it's a hyperbole or not a hyperbole. So this would be a really good time to pause the video, read through sentences 1 through 8, and decide if they're a hyperbole or not a hyperbole. And then you can tune back in and see if you got it correct. All right, so number 1 says, I have a million things to do today. That is a hyperbole. That's a hyperbole because a million things is an exaggeration. Number 2, Harold ate a large sandwich for lunch. That is not a hyperbole. There is no exaggeration in this sentence. From here on out, I'm going to write H for hyperbole and NH for not hyperbole. Number 3, Mary will be back in just a second. That is hyperbole. Coming back in 1 second is an exaggeration. It just means that she'll be back soon. She'll be back very quickly. Number 4, Ken will be back in about an hour. That is not a hyperbole. That is not an exaggeration. There's nothing exaggerated in that sentence. Number 5, when Jamie told us the joke, we nearly died laughing. That is a hyperbole. That is an exaggeration. You didn't actually nearly die from laughing. You were just laughing really hard. Number 6, my grandmother will turn 67 years old tomorrow. That is not a hyperbole. There is nothing exaggerated in that sentence. Number 7, my mother is always working. That is a hyperbole. When we see words like always or never, that's a clue that this sentence is probably going to be a hyperbole. The reason for that is when we see always or never, it's kind of like a definite thing. So if we say, my mother is always working, literally that would mean that my mother never ever stops working. She doesn't sleep, she doesn't eat, she doesn't leave work or anything. She only works and never ever ever stops. And that's not really possible, right? So what we mean here is that my mother is working a lot. She works a whole lot. Number 8, Notre Dame has a terrific football team this year. That is not a hyperbole. There are no exaggerations there. Numbers 9 and 10, I'd like you to rewrite each sentence and add a hyperbole with your sentence. I'm going to give you a couple of examples, but please do not write my examples. Please come up with your own sentence. Number 9, Uncle Larry is very smart. We could say something like, Uncle Larry is as smart as Albert Einstein, or is smarter than Albert Einstein would be an even better hyperbole. Number 10, my friend is a fast runner. We could say, my friend is faster than the Flash. Right? Those are both hyperboles. When I check your work, please make sure that you do not write the examples that I gave you. I'd like you to use your smart brain to come up with your own examples. Now let's take a look at alliteration. So for alliteration, for part 1, we're going to read each sentence and then find any alliteration that we see within the sentence. It says to underline, but I'm going to highlight. It's a little bit easier for me. So if you'd like to highlight rather than underline, that's totally fine. So this would be a good time to pause the video, read sentences 1 through 6, and decide which words are alliteration. And then once you're done, you can pop back on and see if you got your answers correct. So number 1 says, Penny decided to write a report about rats. So we're listening for sounds that are the same. Well, I hear the sound a lot in write, report, and rats. Even though write starts with W and report and rats start with R, that is still alliteration because they both sound, the letter R and the blend WR still make the sound. Number 2, Theo is typically timid in new situations. Alliteration in this sentence is typically and timid. Now, Theo has a T at the beginning, but Theo starts with the TH sound, not the T sound like in timid or typically. Just because the words start with the same letter, T, doesn't mean that they are alliteration. We have to listen for the sounds. Number 3, Kristen is quite creative and crafty. Kristen, creative, and crafty is alliteration. Even though Kristen starts with K and creative starts with C and crafty starts with C, they all start with that cur sound in the beginning, like Kristen, creative, and crafty. Even though they start with different letters, the sounds are the same. Number 4, Sarah sat in the center of the circle. Sarah, sat, center, and circle are the alliteration pieces. Just because Sarah and sat start with S and center and circle start with C doesn't mean that it's not alliteration. They all start with the same sound at the beginning, regardless of what letter is making it. Number 5 has kind of 2 pieces of alliteration. We have the feisty fox was a cunning character. Feisty and fox is alliteration. They both start with the sound. And cunning character is another set of alliteration. They both start with the k sound. And number 6, Josh was blinded by a blizzard of blue confetti. Blinded, blizzard, and blue is the alliteration in this sentence. Now, by is also in that sentence. By does start with the B sound. However, blinded, blizzard, and blue start with the BL blend sound, the bull sound. Whereas by starts with just the B sound, the B sound. Since those words don't all start with the same consonant sound, they are not alliteration. Or by is not included in the alliteration, even though they start with the same letter. For numbers 1 through 4 in part 2, you're going to follow the directions to write alliteration sentences. So you're going to use the TR sound, the TR sound. So for example, we could say, Tracy tried to trace the train. So Tracy, tried, trace, and train all use that TR sound at the beginning. And then number 2, use the sh sound. So we can say, she shows Shelby actually I'm going to change this, sorry about that, the shells. We have she, shows, Shelby, and shells all start with that sh sound at the beginning. Number 3 says to use the n sound, but it says to try to use words that start with at least 2 different letters, so N or KN. So we can say not nanny. Nancy knew Noah had a newt. So we have Nancy knew Noah had a newt. Those all start with the n sound. Even though new starts with the K, it is alliteration since KN makes the n sound. And the last part, we're using the k sound. So it wants us to try to use C, K, or CH also in our sentence. So we can say, Kathy caught chases. Sorry, actually we can't use chases. I'm sorry, that makes the ch sound. Kathy caught the cat character in the game. So we have Kathy caught the cat character in the game. So K makes the k sound, C makes the k sound in caught and cat, and CH in character makes the k sound as well. So very quickly, let's take a look at your independent practice. So your independent practice is two different pieces. We are looking at hyperbole and at alliteration. So the first part is hyperbole. You have two sentences that you are going to read, and it is asking you to do two different things. So it's asking you to tell us what the word means, or what the sentence means literally, and what it means figuratively. So literally, what is the sentence saying? And figuratively, what does the author mean? The next page, I know that mine is sideways. I can't change that on my iPad, unfortunately. But this is where we're going to practice alliteration. So it says to choose two letter sounds, and write an alliteration sentence for each one. You'll notice that there are these boxes to the side. You do not need to do anything with those boxes. If you'd like to draw a picture there, you can. If you'd like to use those boxes to write the letter or letter sound that you're going to be using, you can, or you can just leave them blank. Doesn't matter, you don't need to use those boxes. Very quickly, let me give you your secret word of the day. Your secret word today is one of my favorite alliteration word, or a word from one of my favorite alliteration phrases, and that word is lizard. So that phrase is leaping lizards. So like, leaping lizards, Larry, look out. So that is your secret word today. If you run into any problems or have any questions, please let me know and I'm happy to help. Have a great rest of your day, everybody.